It was a warm spring morning in Charlotte, North Carolina. The sun filtered through the windows of Davidson Christian Academy, casting long golden lines across the gymnasium floor. Outside, dogwood trees bloomed in soft whites and pinks, and the scent of fresh-cut grass lingered in the air. Inside, the gym buzzed with anticipation. Rows of folding chairs had been set up in front of a small stage, draped with a navy blue curtain, and decorated with paper doves and handmade signs that read "Faith and Service Assembly, let your light shine." Proud parents filled the seats, dressed in spring dresses, polos, and pressed khakis. Teachers stood along the walls with encouraging smiles, whispering reminders to stay respectful and listen closely. In the second row sat Stephen Curry and Aisha, blending in as much as global icons possibly could. Stephen wore a simple grey hoodie and jeans, trying to keep a low profile. Aisha held her phone in her lap, discreetly recording moments for the family album. Their youngest son, Canon, was about to walk onto the stage. He stood backstage, fidgeting, with the hem of his shirt, the school's emblem, stitched proudly on the pocket. His small fingers trembled slightly. The paper in his hand was slightly wrinkled. He had rehearsed this speech at home, but now the reality of the crowd made his heart pound. A teacher gently tapped his shoulder and gave him a nod. It was time. As Canon stepped out, his sneakers squeaked softly on the polished gym floor. The buzz of the crowd faded into an almost sacred hush. He reached the microphone and stared out at the sea of faces, classmates, parents, teachers, and his mum and dad. He took a breath. His voice cracked slightly but held steady. "Hi, my name is Canon Curry, and I'm in the 4th grade." A few supportive chuckles echoed. He looked down at his notes, then back up. "I want to talk about something my dad told me. He's famous. You probably know that, but he told me something once that I think about a lot." Stephen sat forward, his elbows on his knees. He didn't know what Canon was going to say. He and Aisha had only heard him practice the first part. He said, "Being famous isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is knowing Jesus Christ." And I didn't get it at first, because I thought winning trophies and having fans was the best. Canon paused. The gym was still. He continued, a bit more confidently. "But then I saw my dad after he lost the finals. He went to the locker room and prayed. He was crying, but not because he was mad. He said, 'Thank you, Jesus.' Even now, that's when I knew faith isn't just for when you win, it's for when it hurts too." Gasps and murmurs rippled across the room. A mother wiped her eyes. A boy in the back whispered, "Whoa." "Jesus loved people who were broken," Canon added, his voice soft but clear. "And I think, if we only believe when life is easy, then maybe we don't believe at all." Stephen's eyes welled up. He glanced at Aisha, who nodded slowly, her expression caught between pride and awe. The gym seemed to hold its breath. Canon looked down for a moment, then finished. "So, I just want to say, I'm thankful to know Jesus, and I hope I can be brave like my dad when life gets hard." He stepped back. A beat of silence, and then a wave of applause broke out. Not the usual polite clapping, but something deeper, more heartfelt. The kind of applause that comes from being moved. Some stood. A teacher near the stage wiped her cheeks. Canon walked off quietly, not realizing he had just sparked something far bigger than himself. Back in the audience, Stephen sat motionless for a moment, his heart pounding. This was different than anything he'd experienced on the court. This wasn't about stats or records. It was something pure, eternal. His son had just opened a window into a part of faith most adults struggle to articulate, and he had done it with courage, humility, and truth. Stephen leaned over and whispered to Aisha, "I didn't know he was going to say that." She smiled through tears. "Neither did I, but that's the Holy Spirit talking. and as the assembly moved on, no one quite heard the next speaker. Canon's words hung in the air like a quiet, unshakable echo. Faith isn't just for when you win, it's for when it hurts too. The next morning, Canon Curry's speech had exploded across the internet. The clip, originally shared by the school's social media, quickly spread far beyond their small community. It was reposted by a few fans of the Golden State Warriors, but it wasn't long before the video was shared by sports networks, faith-based groups, and even mainstream news outlets. On ESPN, an anchor remarked, "If you think Stephen Curry is an icon for basketball alone, this morning we found a new reason to admire him." The hashtag, the Canon Curry Faith, trended worldwide within hours. The moment, captured by a shaky handheld camera, had an innocence that resonated with so many. Here was a 10-year-old boy standing before hundreds of people, expressing a faith that was both simple and profound, raw and unpolished. But with the praise came the controversy. As the video spread, so did the debates. Some online praised the courage of such a young boy to speak about faith so boldly. Others, however, found his words controversial. Critics questioned whether it was appropriate for a child of such a prominent public figure to talk about Jesus in such a direct, unapologetic way. Aisha was the first to notice the flood of reactions on social media. Her phone buzzed constantly, texts from friends, comments from strangers, and a barrage of notifications from Twitter and Instagram. She scrolled through her feed, seeing headlines like "Stephen Curry's son talks faith" and "Young Canon Curry makes bold statement about Jesus in public speech." Some praised him as a future leader of the next generation. Others lashed out, calling the speech politically incorrect or out of place. Aisha's fingers hovered over the screen. She showed Stephen one comment from an angry fan. "We're here for basketball, not sermons from a kid." Stephen sat quietly next to her, his own phone in hand, but he wasn't reading the comments. He was thinking about what Canon had said the night before. He had been overwhelmed by the courage his son had shown, but now he felt the weight of the attention. He knew this wasn't just about faith anymore. This was about family, public perception, and the responsibility that came with their platform. That night, as they sat down to dinner, the family was quiet. Canon pushed his peas around on his plate, his eyes cast downward. He hadn't fully understood the scale of what had happened, but he could sense that something was different. "Canon," Stephen said gently, looking at his son. "How are you feeling?" "About what happened this morning?" Canon looked up. "I don't know, Dad. Everyone's talking about me, but I didn't want to make a big deal. I just thought I should share what I believe." His voice was quiet, unsure. Aisha smiled softly. "And that's why it mattered, baby. You didn't try to make it about you. You spoke the truth because you felt it was important. And that's rare." Stephen took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I'm proud of you, son. I've been in tough moments on that court, and I've seen how hard it can be to make decisions based on what's right. But what you did, it takes courage to stand up for what you believe in, especially when people don't always agree." Canon's eyes widened as his dad continued. "But you should know," Stephen added, "there are going to be people who don't get it or who don't agree with you. That's normal. But you've done something so important, something that not many people do." For a moment, Canon stayed silent, but then his face lit up with a smile. "I didn't mean to make people mad, though, Dad. I just wanted them to know how important Jesus is." Aisha reached over and squeezed his hand. "Baby, you didn't make anyone mad. You made them think. And sometimes that's exactly what we need." The public response. The next few days were a whirlwind for the Curry family. Canon's speech became more than just a local viral moment. It became a topic of discussion across platforms. Stephen's agent called him, expressing how the video was being shared by thousands and gaining traction with religious influencers. Some asked for interviews, wanting to hear from Canon directly. Others reached out for Stephen's perspective on how faith guided him in his life and career. But as the positive responses poured in, the negative reactions seemed to grow louder. A major sports blog posted a heated opinion piece titled, "Should Kids of Celebrities Use Their Platform for Religion?" The writer argued that young people shouldn't be exploited for their parents' beliefs. The article questioned whether a child, especially one as young as Canon, should be put in a position where his faith became public fodder. Stephen felt the weight of the backlash more deeply than he expected. His initial pride had slowly been replaced by concern for his son. He didn't want Canon to feel responsible for a firestorm he didn't start. That evening, he sat with Aisha in their living room, both of them staring at the flood of social media posts and news articles. "What if this is too much for him?" Stephen said, his voice low. "What if he starts feeling pressure because of all of this? What if he starts doubting his words, thinking he shouldn't have spoken up?" Aisha sighed, leaning her head on Stephen's shoulder. "We'll protect him, we'll guide him. He's just a kid, Stephen, and he doesn't understand the magnitude of what happened, but I believe in him. He's got a strong foundation." The following day, Stephen invited Canon into his home office, a small room filled with basketball memorabilia, books, and a giant window that overlooked the backyard. Canon looked up at him curiously. "Dad, are you okay?" Stephen sat across from him and smiled. "I'm okay, buddy. But I want you to know that you did something incredible, something that I don't think even I could have done at your age. And I'm proud of you. You were brave." Canon's eyes filled with curiosity. "Do you think people are mad at me?" Stephen smiled softly. "Some people might not understand, but that's okay. What you said came from your heart, and when we speak from our hearts, we're always on the right path. I just want people to know that it's okay to trust in Jesus, even when things don't go right, like when we lose." Stephen nodded, his own heart full. "You've learned something I didn't fully understand until much later in life. Faith isn't just about the highs, it's about the lows too. It's about trusting when we don't have all the answers." Canon smiled, a weight lifted from his young shoulders. "Okay, Dad, I get it." The next step. As the viral moment continued to unfold, something unexpected happened. Schools across the country started sharing the video with their students. It was used in church youth groups, in classrooms, and on faith-based platforms. Students began talking more openly about their beliefs, sharing stories of how they had struggled or triumphed through faith, just like Canon had spoken about. Stephen's phone buzzed again. It was an invitation, this time to speak at a youth conference in Chicago, one that was drawing thousands of young people. It wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about a message far bigger than the sport. And he knew this was the beginning of something transformative, not just for his family, but for others as well. In the days following Canon's speech, the world around the Curry family began to change. The media picked up on his words, and soon the internet was flooded with clips of his speech. His message, so sincere and heartfelt, struck a chord far beyond their local community. It was as if a ripple had formed, spreading outward, touching people from all walks of life. Stephen and Aisha watched as the story exploded in the headlines, with interviews, news outlets, and social media buzzing about the 10-year-old boy who spoke with the wisdom of someone much older. Canon had become an unlikely voice for faith, and that frightened them just a little. They had always tried to keep their children grounded, away from the spotlight, but now their son was at the center of a media storm. "It feels like everything's moving so fast," Aisha said one evening, sitting down beside Stephen in their living room. Canon had just finished a school project, but his mind seemed elsewhere. "We wanted to raise him with faith and humility, not turn him into some kind of celebrity." Stephen nodded, glancing over at Canon, who was quietly reading his Bible on the couch. It's a lot to process. I never imagined it would go this far, but I think his message is bigger than just him. It's what people need to hear right now. I'm just worried about the pressure it might put on him, Aisha admitted, concern filling her voice. He's only 10. How do we protect him from all of this? Stephen took a deep breath and sat next to her. We just keep doing what we've always done. Keep him close to us, stay focused on our faith, and remind him that the only thing that matters is that he's speaking his truth. This isn't about the fame, it's about the message. He's already done something remarkable. Over the next few weeks, Canon received messages from across the country. Teenagers reached out to share how his words had inspired them to reconnect with their faith, while others, struggling with their own challenges, thanked him for giving them hope when they needed it most. It was overwhelming, but also humbling. A few months later, Canon was invited to speak at the City Hope Youth Conference in Chicago, one of the largest youth gatherings in the country. It was a big deal, a platform that could amplify his message to thousands. And while Canon was honored, he was also nervous. The pressure was mounting, and he didn't want to disappoint anyone, especially his parents. One evening before the event, Stephen sat down with Canon in their hotel room. The lights of the city flickered outside, but inside, the room was quiet, filled with the kind of peaceful energy that only family could provide. Canon was fidgeting with the notes for his speech, his mind racing. "Dad, what if I mess up?" Canon asked, his voice low. "What if I don't say the right thing?" Stephen smiled gently and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Canon, you're not here to be perfect. You're here to speak from your heart, just like you did before. You've already made a huge impact just by being yourself. Don't worry about what you think people expect from you. Speak your truth. That's the only thing that matters." Aisha, sitting nearby, added softly, "You've already shown so much courage, baby. Just trust that God has given you this opportunity for a reason." Canon took a deep breath, feeling comforted by his parents' support. He wasn't alone in this. The weight of expectations seemed to lift just a little. He wasn't there to be a celebrity. He was there to share something much more important. The day of the conference arrived. Thousands of young people filled the arena, their excited voices buzzing through the air. Canon stood backstage, his heart pounding. He had spoken in front of smaller crowds before, but this was different. The spotlight was on him, and he could feel it. But when Canon stepped onto the stage, something changed. The moment he took the microphone, all his nerves seemed to melt away. The crowd fell silent, waiting for him to speak. "I'm Canon Curry," he began, his voice shaking just slightly, but it was steady. "I know a lot of people think being famous is the best thing in life. I've seen my dad work hard to get where he is. But I've learned something much more important than being famous." He paused for a moment, looking out at the audience, their faces full of anticipation. "Jesus is the only thing that really matters. Fame, money, trophies, they come and go. But Jesus is always with us, and that's what gives me peace." The silence in the room was thick, as if everyone was hanging on his every word. Canon continued, his words coming more naturally now. "When my dad lost the finals a few years ago, I saw him pray. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about trusting Jesus no matter what. And I want you to know that even when life gets hard, Jesus is enough. He'll never leave you." The crowd sat still for a moment, and then, as if they were all moved by his sincerity, applause filled the arena. Canon smiled, his heart soaring. He had done it. He had shared what was in his heart, and that was enough. After the speech, Canon was greeted by organizers and fans who praised him for his words. But for Canon, the praise didn't matter. What mattered was that he had stayed true to his message. His faith was his foundation, and that was something no one could take away from him.